In this week's episode of YTartschool, I'll take you guys through my secret method to practice and study anatomy. It's helped me level up super fast to the point I can basically draw every muscle of the body from memory, which has allowed me to draw very detailed anatomy charts and 3D sculpts for my classes. But of course, the initial goal was just to be able to draw awesome looking characters. So if that's your goal too, you're in the right place. And I'll show you for free. I'm just kidding. What? It'll cost you either 1 like or 1 sub. So pay your class fee and let me show you everything that I know to study and learn anatomy as fast as possible. So my secret method starts with gesture drawing. But why? What's the point really? This is something that I teach in my art program in the very first term, and there's good reasons. For art beginners, for those of you who don't really have a whole lot of experience yet, or just no experience at all drawing, it's an amazing exercise to practice your observation skill, particularly selective observation, where you only focus on certain details and ignore the rest. And as an artist, honestly, selective observation is really the most important skill to develop, which is why we tackle it so early. But gesture drawing also helps you practice spatial perception, which includes stuff like locating points in space, determining the orientation of lines and objects, assessing location in depth, and geometric relations between objects. All skills that apply to art in general, and skills that will automatically level up as you practice gesture drawing, so very important stuff to focus on developing first. When you start to gain more experience though, gesture drawing also helps as a fantastic visual library booster for poses, proportions, and anatomy. I make it a point to mention beginners and more advanced artists in 2 different groups because what you'll want to focus on when practicing gesture drawing will differ quite a bit depending on your experience level. In our case today, I'll focus more on experienced artists, like the way I practice now. Alright, now how to draw gestures. Let's go over a few important tips that I find myself repeating often to my students. For most beginners, I'll usually recommend you practice spotting the lines of actions for your models, your references, give pointers to help with body proportions, how to create simple mannequins to learn the body proportions, and provide techniques to measure distances between the different elements, etc., etc. But here instead, I'll try to explain what I focus on and explain my process as someone who's been practicing gesture drawing for well over a decade now, almost 2 decades. And you should be able to follow this method no problem if you're past that beginner stage in your art education. So with that out of the way, what I've been doing so far are quick warm-ups, 1 minute each, and they're meant to just get me in the flow, get the engine started. And by the way, this little app I'm using here is something I've used for the last, I don't know, 10 years or so, maybe more. It's just called gesture drawing in 1 word, and it allows you to select a folder of your own, full of your own references, and then kind of lets you build this custom drawing session based on your own preferences. So how long you're gonna take per images before it switches to the next one. You can also disable the timer completely. It's got a bunch of options, really cool. And yeah, if you wanted to, I'll put an affiliate link in the video description if you're curious and you want to get it too. And when you use the link, it doesn't add anything to the price. It just allows me to get paid and feed my family, Anyways, now that I'm warmed up, I'm gonna move on to longer 2-minute poses now, which is the usual time limit that I'll set for myself for these studies. Before I talk about anything else though, let's talk about the references that I have here. You might not think much of it, but the type of reference you use will make a huge impact on how well you're able to retain the information, essentially how effective they are. Because references are not created equal. So what I always recommend is to use references that you can imagine yourself needing information from in the future. In other words, I always avoid references in crazy poses, crazy complicated poses, or extreme angles when I study. Just like you probably forgot a bunch of topics you learned in elementary school or high school, because you couldn't see a point in learning them back then. It's kind of the same with art references. If you're working on a pose like this, for example, subconsciously your brain will just go, what is this, bro? There's just no way I need to retain this information. It'll never be useful in the future. At least for me, right? Because I never draw poses like these in my illustrations. So for me, I'll use poses that, again, I'm way more likely to use in the future, like characters standing up in cool poses, maybe holding swords or different weapons. And as a result, I get to retain a lot more information from each of them, and I level up faster. Because subconsciously, your brain knows oh, this is a good reference. I might need this information later. So it keeps it in. Epic brain hacks. Do it! And by the way, I'll also put the affiliate link to these photo packs in the video description if you're curious where I get mine. They're awesome, and I highly recommend spending a few bucks on professional model photos if you can afford it. Like I said, better refs, better progress. Now, as I work on these gestures, I'm not trying to copy what I see, which is probably what the majority of artists do. And that's completely fine, I guess, as a beginner, but later on, no. Instead, I recommend you construct your gestures using a simple mannequin. So I guess what's important to understand here is I'm not trying to get good at gesture drawing as an art form. I don't care for that skill much. Instead, I use gesture drawing to get better at drawing characters from imagination and to learn anatomy at the same time. That's all. So there's a subtle difference there. It's just a tool to get me to my goal, compared to most where the gesture drawing is the goal. In my case, it's not the final product, so it's always just meant as a study, something that I don't really intend to share. What I'm looking for or what I'm observing when I practice is only the pose and the anatomy. That's it. I don't really look at the proportions of the model, because when I construct the character using my mannequin, well, the proportions should already be figured out. So that's the whole point of the mannequin. So I don't really need to observe them on the reference. So my goal is not to draw this model here, only to selectively use her pose and her anatomy. It's very specific. So that's kind of why it's not for beginners, right? You need to obviously have some experience drawing the human mannequin, at least in a neutral pose first, to learn the human proportions. And by the way, if you're at that step right now, like learning the mannequin, well, I made a video a couple of months ago where I showed 3 different ways to draw the body. So I would highly recommend you check that video out later if you're not sure about, your own mannequin, or if you don't have one yet. And I would practice it for a while until you can draw it from memory and then come back to gesture drawing like I do it here. Anyways, to recap so far, choose your references carefully. It has a big impact on how you'll improve. Then warm up with some quick 1-minute poses, and then we'll follow that with longer 2-minute poses where you'll really want to focus more on the anatomy and of course the pose. We're inspiring ourselves from the reference, not copying it. And because you're just inspiring yourself from it, you can exaggerate the poses if you feel more confident. When you approach the study this way, when it's clear that the point is not to copy the reference, it's a lot more liberating and a lot more fun of an exercise, in my opinion. Before I move on to the second half of the method, if you're interested in learning anatomy but on a whole different level, like really going in deep and having all the learning material provided for you in a simple to understand, simple to follow way, I have about 10 hours of anatomy classes in my complete university equivalent art program that you can do from home, and that's just like 10% of the entire program, covering in great detail all of the art fundamentals and much more. It's a complete 2-year art education that costs less than a single week of attendance would cost you, just a week at most traditional art schools in the United States. And it's arguably much better too, which is probably why we've reached past 28,000 enrolled students so far, with an overwhelming number of them giving a 5-star rating. Our summer sale has actually just started, so you can get the full program with all the assignments, the week-by-week study guide, and access to our private Discord at a massive discount for a couple more days. The link is down in the video description below. But to be fair, you don't need it. I didn't have access to something like that when I was up and coming, and I still made it to where I am today, but it is everything that I wish I had back then, so I think it's worth checking out if you want the most direct path to your art goals. But back to learning anatomy. I'll just say that experience plays a big role in the speed of your gesture drawings. So like if 1-minute poses or 2-minute poses just too short for you, like it was for me just a couple years ago, then go ahead and double the length that you spend on these. It's not a race, but you don't want to spend much more than like 5 minutes on any gesture unless you want to practice shading it, because obviously that takes more time. The goal is not really to draw fast, it's to illustrate a lot with very few lines. It's a big difference here. So you gotta optimize your process and be able to do more with less time. This in itself will speed up your process, not like just actually moving your hand faster, because the speed is just like a side effect of a more efficient gesture drawing. I'm sure there's a lot more that I could optimize in my own gesture drawings. That's why I keep practicing. I learn something new every single time. And once I'm done with all of this, most of the time there's gonna be a bunch in there that I kinda like more than the rest. And those will typically make for great foundation for a new character drawing. So that's the next step. I'll select one of those quick gesture drawings that I liked, and then maybe dress it up in a cool armor, maybe color it, and make that into a full character. And the way that I learn anatomy doing that, what's worked wonders for me is to just focus on drawing the muscles for that specific pose. Instead of studying anatomy charts and trying to memorize everything without context. I find people remember things much more when there's context. And the context in this case will be helping make my character drawing look more believable. I'm more invested into it now that it's not just a quick gesture study. So I'm going to be subconsciously paying much closer attention to any knowledge that might help me make this drawing look better, more anatomically accurate. So as I transition from just a simple gesture drawing to a full-on character drawing, I'll obviously need to work on the body a little bit more to make it more anatomically correct, more detailed. At that point, it might be a good idea to pull up some anatomy charts because I have a problem that I need a solution for. In the best case scenario, all you need is just one great photo reference with a shredded model in a cool pose, so you have everything you need basically from that one reference photo. Like with something like this, all the muscles are clearly visible, so this is a great reference material. Of course, you won't learn the whole anatomy doing this once, but by doing this over and over again is how I learned every surface muscle of the body, seeing them in different angles, sometimes flexed, sometimes relaxed. It just gives you this really complete picture that a simple anatomy chart really can't provide. So this is the method, and this is what I've seen my students get the most progress doing. So you should try it, maybe. I mean, there's a good chance some of you are already doing these steps, but what really works is all of those steps in that specific order. That's what's gonna bring results. And if you think this helps, don't hesitate to share the video with somebody you think might need it. I would definitely appreciate that. Oh, and since you made it all the way until the end of the class, starting now and until the end of the month, you'll be able to pick up my starter brush pack for completely free. Just like my art program, I'll put a link down in the video description, so check it out if you're interested. It contains some of my favorite brushes that I use all the time, including the line art brush that I use for all of these drawings today. I love you. Oh, and as you eagerly wait for next week's art class, my video on different ways to draw the human body should appear on the screen here in a second. I'll see you there.